don't know. This is wrong, 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 wrong. Good afternoon. This is Dave Mathis. I'm the retired band director from Lake Oswego High School, and I'm pleased to be the host of OBDA Conversations. Frank Petrick gave me this idea as he heard about this when he went back to the Midwest and heard about conversations with retired band directors, and it really gives us a chance to do some archival and pick the brains of some of the state's best. And it's my pleasure to have as our first guest with us today is Mr. Chuck Bolton. Chuck, how are you today?
I am fine. Thank you.
And we're doing this via Skype because of the virus thing going on. So it's, even though we can't be here face to face, this is the next best thing. And I'm, again, pleased that you could be our first interview.
Thank you.
Also, for those of you that are watching on Facebook, if you do have comments or questions to give to Chuck at some point during this conversation, we'll be posting those interview questions to Chuck, and we'll post those online. So Chuck, tell me, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
I grew up in Park Rose. Started the fourth grade there and went through beginning band. They actually had beginning band in the fourth grade in those years. And then went junior high. My director was a man named Wolfgang, a old German, and then Park Rose High School.
Fourth grade, how many days a week did you meet during fourth grade for band?
I think it was 5. And
Wow.
so after 4 years, just to add on to that, in the 7th, 8th grade, I was 12th chair trumpet of 12. I had my top note was an E, top bass, and he needed a tuba player and asked me if I could play tuba. I would try it, and I did. And about a month later, I was sitting first chair in an all-city band, in a junior high band.
Yeah, and that was in what grade?
That would have been actually my freshman year. Park Rose, we had the old 3-year junior high, 3-year senior high.
Okay, so you switched to tuba. And did you start with tuba lessons right away, or did you just do like most people in band, just started playing tuba and getting some help with your band director?
Well, in my case, I had my high school band director was Glenn Garrett, Glenn was an incredible musician, outstanding French horn player, but we had a few conflicts. In the process, I got removed from band several times, and my dad found a wonderful private teacher by the name of Mr. Dr. John Richards. He was an old white-haired man when I started with him in the late 50s, but I studied with John.
Well, and John, and I was going to bring up John a little bit later, and he's a legend in this area. John Richards, tell people who John Richards was.
Well, Dr. John Richards, many of you do know, and many of you don't, was the principal tuba player in the Oregon Symphony for over 50 years. He was also director of bands at Lewis and Clark College in the 50s, I believe 60s, and later became the dean of the education department because he had his PhD in education.
And I know you've come to become close friends with John. And did you get something from John, like a mouthpiece or something? I know you have a lot of things from John, but I remember something about a mouthpiece.
You know what? I don't remember what that mouthpiece
There's something with a mouthpiece for you had a string around. Anyway, but I know.
Oh, okay. Oh, just a quick comment. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll go there. John was an outstanding high school musician. He was the national champion on tuba and I think trombone and clarinet in a contest back in Indiana or Illinois. But his original mouthpiece, he had a string around the mouthpiece, around the throat of it, and I have that mouthpiece and the string's still there. Yes.
Cool. I do have to admit that sometimes our streaming isn't as good as it could be. There's some things going on here at our end, and you might be pixelating too. What we'll be doing in the future is going to a higher stream and maybe just going to YouTube as well. So thank you for everyone to give us some patience today. As Chuck can tell you, we've been on the phone and on the computer quite a few hours the last couple of days making sure this thing goes. Well, you're in high school at Park Rose, and what prompted you to, did you major in music right away, or did you major in something else?
No, didn't have much money, and I went to a small private college that was majoring in music. I was doing a lot of singing in high school and in college, and always wanted to go into music, and transferred from there to Portland State University, where I did get my degree.
And who is the band director at Portland State at that time?
Gordon Soley was my band director, and John Steen was my advisor. And for those of you that don't know John Steen, he was director of bands at the University of Oregon, before he went to Portland State.
And Gordon Soley was a fine bassoonist, if I remember.
Outstanding. Played principal in the Oregon Symphony at that time.
So you majored in music, and where did you do your student teaching?
Well, in those days, we student taught half days at Portland State. I started in the fall with an incredible director named Fred Schmalley at Gresham High School. Gresham High School in those days had the finest band in Oregon. He had 90 in his top band. I realize that's a huge number by today's standards, but here's the catch. Over 70 of them were taking private lessons.
Wow, 70 of 90 kids taking private lessons?
And he started his jazz band on Monday nights and had all these great musicians, and a number of them around town, people will tell you. And he started a jazz band, and they went to Reno and won sweepstakes 3 years in a row. That was back in the mid-'60s.
Okay, and then after Gresham, did you student teach someplace else as well?
Well, then I went to Jefferson High School and with Don Wolf, and that was in the middle of, that was 1965, which was the middle of a lot of race riots and a lot of unrest. And that was rather interesting because I was at Jefferson High School in Portland. Learned a lot. I figured if I could survive the discipline or the classroom situations there, I could do it anywhere. And then I went to Ione Schwartz. No one out there will remember her. She was at, middle school in Portland. I can't remember the name of it now. Brilliant lady. And, general music, choir, strings, band, did the whole gamut. So I felt I had an excellent student teaching and experience.
Well, that's really cool. After student teaching, then did you get a job right out of college teaching music?
Yeah. Well, by the way, while I was doing all of that as student teaching, I had a church choir job and directed a choir, and I was playing full time with the Oregon Symphony. It was then the Portland Symphony. So my senior year was a busy one. Most money I ever made in my life.
That,
Yeah, I was offered some positions. I was offered actually a couple high school choral positions,
hmm.
but I took a job at Napa out by Astoria because I could do band, choir, high school, and middle school because I didn't really know what I preferred at that moment.
So you're the band director and choir director for both the high school and the junior high.
Correct.
Uh,
And head track coach and head wrestling coach. We took actually fifth in state my second year as wrestling coach.
really? Wrestling coach. I knew about the track part because I know for years when you were at San Barlow, you were the track announcer for the track
Yes.
meets, but I didn't know anything about the wrestling part. Uh, and did you recruit any of those high school wrestlers into your band?
No, some of them were already in band, and like many small high schools, and the people out there can relate to this. We had a basketball team, and I had a pretty good little jazz band for a small school, and we would play at halftime of the basketball games. But the four of the five starting lineup were in the band.
Yeah.
So the coach against the teams that weren't real good, we perform at halftime, and if the team was real good, we didn't perform halftime.
Well, how long were you at Napa then?
2 years.
2 years.
Two, yes.
And
I'll share a little story with you. This is when you're young and I'm not quite sure what the word is, excited and emotional at times, because I was 22 when I started at Napa. Uh, the first week of classes, the rally squad, the cheerleaders came up to me on a Thursday morning and says, "Now you're going to be at the bonfire tonight, right? First week of and play." And I went, "No, no, I didn't know anything about that." And so they went back and told the other students that Mr. Bolton wasn't going to let the band play at the bonfire that night. And
oh,
I was just so angry. First year teacher, trying to make a good impression. I went in to see my principal because the principal was the one that told the girls that I wouldn't let the band play. And I says, "I'm quitting. This is stupid. I'm done." And he wasn't in there. And I picked up the phone. I said, "I'm calling the superintendent. I'm done. I'm finished." And the lady that was the secretary, I dialed the number, and the old rotary phones had a little button, you could push down.
yeah, yeah.
She says, "Chuck, nope." She pushed it down. She said, "You're not making that call." She said, "If you want to make that call tomorrow, you can, but you're not making it today. Sorry."
Wow, that
And
is a great story. You're like this close away,
yeah,
literally about this close away.
literally. You're correct. Yeah.
2 years, and so what prompted you to? So I take it after Napa, you went to. Well, where did you go after Napa?
Well, I heard about a new high school opening up. I applied to San Barlow High School. A lot of applicants for a new high school, but I was fortunate that I was offered the position and took it.
Wow, San Barlow, and that was the first year.
Yeah, when the school opened in 1968. I taught 66 to 68 at Napa, and then in 68 I went to San Barlow.
Wow, that's amazing. And if I remember correctly, you were the first band director at San Barlow.
Yes, and the first band director at Damascus, and the first band director at Boring, and I also taught at Orion. I taught 4 schools a day for 2 years.
It's kind of really fascinating that for the long history of success at San Barlow, there's only been two band directors, you and Paul Nicholas.
That's right.
That's, boy, not very many schools can say that. So when you started in 1968, What was your first year of teaching in a brand new school like?
It was really kind of a honeymoon in the sense that we had broken off from Gresham High School. We had freshmen, sophomore, juniors. We had 450 students, and the kids were out to make a name for themselves. They wanted to show everyone that they were just as good as Gresham High School, and there was such camaraderie. The kids were motivated. It was wonderful.
And so when you started off at San Barlow and you're teaching at all these middle schools too, what was your class load like at San Barlow?
Well, I had the symphonic band. The first year I didn't have a jazz band because Jim Quebec, some people will know Jim. He was the band director at Gresham when I was started at Sam Barlow. I had all of the saxophones and the rhythm section, and he had the trumpets and the trombones. So we had for 1 year a district jazz band. But I taught algebra too that year.
I taught math when I was at Reynolds High School as well. So you're talking about Gresham. When you, at that time, it was 1968, 1970, who or what were some of the strong band programs around the state?
Wow. Well, Roseburg High School definitely was one of the biggies. Um, I should have thought about that. It's hard to really remember. That's a long time ago. Come on now. But South Eugene High School in the 70s, um, Beaverton High School in Portland, Cleveland High School was an outstanding program, and Oregon City was well known for their program at that time. And I know I'm forgetting some. David Douglas, obviously, but yeah.
Well, I know when I started teaching, and this was in 1980, there were again,
And you're
really
a
good.
young guy. I didn't know you were that young.
You are very kind, sir. Very kind. Actually, I started teaching my first 2 weeks of teaching, I was 21. So I had kids that were 18 and I was 21. So I had a really bad tie and a worse mustache. Anyway, I had a number of bands that I looked up to and directors. Did you have any mentors or any band directors that you could rely on to help you through those first few years of teaching?
Uh, Really, it was Fred Schmalley that was at Gresham for those years and was later at Reynolds. And now, by the way, I think he's about 90. He helps out at Taft High School with the trombone still and plays in a band and sings. I mean, he was an incredible man and musician.
Oh, that's awesome. So 1968 and 1970, and I know you still do a lot of work with going in and helping out with bands and teachers. What do you see is the biggest similarity and the biggest difference between teaching band today as it did when you did it in the 1970s?
Oh, there's such a difference today. Partly I think the music ed classes are taught so much better today than they were then. We do our music history and theory and basic conducting, and we play on instruments too. But one of the things to really mention is that I think intonation became such a bigger issue, say in the late '80s into the '90s. We would do the war horses in the early '70s, and I remember one time about 19 in the early '80s, my band had played at all state and all Northwest and played different things. I listened to some recordings from the mid '70s, and I was appalled. I was embarrassed because the bands had improved so much. And even in the last 15, 20 years, they continue to improve. So that's one of the biggest differences, better training in the colleges, and also that intonation became a far bigger issue.
I also think that the wealth of music that band directors have to choose from is much greater now than it was back in the 70s and even 80s, with so many more composers and people writing, especially specifically for band.
That obviously that's very true. You didn't have, we were doing, I loved orchestral transcriptions, I still do. but there was a lot more of that going on in those days, and there weren't any real band composers as we have today, or just composers who write a lot for orchestra and band. I mean, we had the whole suites,
Yeah.
and
You had the Granger, Sousa, of course.
well, not people really didn't do much Granger. We did a couple little things. Every Lincolnshire was considered out of the high school's repertoire. That's another thing. Bands have gotten technically better now, and so we would do selections from and highlights and watered down this from an orchestral thing. Um, there was some good band stuff, but nothing like the last 30, 40 years I've had.
Well, Sam Barlow, you mentioned your performances at the state conventions. I think maybe All Northwest as well, and you had so many chances to play with so many great kids. But one thing I was thinking of that I've really come to notice that there's a lot of band directors that have kids that are in their program, and I know you had it's your son and your daughter play as well.
Two daughters.
Both play. Okay. And what's it like to have those kids in your band program?
Well, okay, here we go again. I hope there's some old people out there watching this, because I keep throwing out names that most people don't know. Earlier, you asked me about outstanding groups when I was in college. Norm Street was at Madison High School, and Madison High School played at the National Music Educators Conference, had a phenomenal program. And he had a son, Larry Street, who was an outstanding clarinetist. And they got into an argument in rehearsal one time, and he kicked his son out and flunked him.
Wow.
And did not speak at the dinner table, I was told, for about a month. And so that was right before I started teaching, and I remembered that well. So when I got to the point where my kids were to be going into band at the high school level, I was kind of apprehensive, and I did some calling around, found out that, yeah, go ahead. And I highly encourage. I know most people now really like having their kids in band. We ride together to school, ride home, share some things. Band director life's pretty busy, and if your kids are in your program, you get to see them once in a while.
Well, and I think you were extremely busy, because not only were you teaching band in a large district, you had other things going on. Polka band, you played in the Circus band, is that correct?
Yeah, that was back mainly in the 60s and early 70s, before Ringling Brothers broke the union. But yeah, that was a lot of fun, doing the ice show and playing the county fairs in the summer and state fair. And
So, I don't think a lot of people know what it's like, and I don't know what it's like. What was it like to play in a circus band?
Well, okay, I'll give you the Ringling Brothers Circus. When they came to town, there's a union minimum. None of these things exist now, but 24 members. They have their drummer that's with them, their organist, and the leader's always a trumpet player. And then they hire local musicians. And we'd show up on a Thursday afternoon for a 3-hour show, and he would talk through the show. We might rehearse 10 minutes and then come back and play a 3-hour show. And if people know circus music, it's all fast. It's just incredible. You got to be a good reader. And you do, no show on Thursday night, 2 shows Friday, 3 shows Saturday, and 2 shows Sunday. But it paid good.
Wow, that sounds like it's a lot of fun. I remember going to one of those shows, and I'd much rather listen to the music than some of the stuff that was going in the rings. Going back to Sam Barlow, myself included, a lot of band directors around the state for years, and still are, using the Sam Barlow warm-up, but it's called the Sam Barlow warm-up. So tell us the story about the Sam Barlow warm-up.
Well, it shouldn't have been titled that. One of my assistants wrote it out and wrote that on top of it. I had the privilege of working 3 or 4 years with Henry Miyamura at Oregon State University, at the summer music camp. And he always told me he was going to start a camp in Hawaii, which he did. And then he brought me over. I was the one Howley on the staff. And this was what he used. And I started using that in the early 80s. Most bands, getting back to differences, most bands never did a warm up. When I was in high school, you just started out with a march. You might play a chorale, but you just start playing. You just started instantly working music. And as soon as I started doing the so-called Sam Barlow, which is Henry's drills, as somebody like Jennifer Muller changed it to, which is more correct. I noticed my band started sounding darker and bigger with a bigger sound because Henry always worked to get a darker tone to the extent that he would sometimes try to cheat and tune the band to A439 instead of 440 to get darker.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it's a wonderful warm up, and a lot of people did use it and found that it worked. And now there's a multitude of warm ups that are similar or have built upon that.
Right, and I like how you pointed out that a lot of bands were not doing warm ups. And I'm actually still surprised a little bit when I've gone and worked with bands that many bands don't do much of a warm up, or there's no consistency, there's no set warm up to help improve the band. So, what are some of your thoughts about what a warm up should be and what should be happening during a warm up?
Well, to me, the warm up is the band director's lifesaver. If you have a standard warm up, the kids walk in, they get their horns out, and if you're available, you start the warm up. If not, you might have your drum major or band president started. You do long tones to get the lip going in the air. You do lip slurs to develop flexibility. I really believe in not letting them read it. It was never written out for a number of years, so that all the clarinet players, the people that know what it is, it's just 8-5-1 or 8-10-12. It goes through the arpeggios.
Right.
So all the woodwinds learn their arpeggios. Brass players learn their flexibility through the lip slurs, and it's a 2-octave range, and it takes about 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes.
Right.
And while you're doing it as a band director, you can fix a clarinet player over here, and you're signing somebody's mid slip over here on your left. And we have to be efficient in rehearsal. There's only so much time.
Yeah, the efficiency, that's a big part of it. And also the consistency. Kids like structure. And if they know the routine and they know what to expect, they will arise to those occasions. And it's something that I really stress upon the student teachers that I'm working with right now. Another thing that you were famous for at your years at Sam Barlow was passing out a piece of music right before a performance or a contest. And so it's kind of a two-question thing, Chuck. Number one is, how did you get the kids to develop those skills to be able to sight read and to perform a piece? And what is the shortest amount of time that, since when you pass out a piece of music, that you performed it at a, let's say, a festival or a contest?
Wow. That's a long question there. Okay, now we're going to go back to personal philosophies. I believe firmly in tapping my foot and having kids learn rhythm. I believe firmly with up, we would do 3 or 4 major scales, 3 times through, because I'd read somewhere that it takes 3 times to get it in your brain and your fingers. And so my band knew their scales really well. I only did about 9 major scales really well. And by doing the scales and rhythms, it allowed kids to sight read well. We did a lot of sight reading. Every festival we went to, we did a new piece, rotated one in, one out. Every festival, we go to 3 or 4 festivals. So between jazz band, symphonic band, pep band, whatnot, we read tons of music. Back when Dave Becker started the original state band contest, he ran for 3 years. If you get a chance, I'm sure you'll be talking about that. It's an important part of our instrumental music history in Oregon. I did a piece in about a week and a half We did. Can't even remember what the piece was now, but it was a tough piece, and we got away with it. The one that I mentioned the most is we were going to mid '90s, and I wanted to find a new piece because we always rotated something out, and at the very last minute, we decided to add a piece. I had a kid named Toby off playing trombone,
Yeah,
who also
Toby.
won state every year on euphonium. And so on the Monday before the state contest, I handed out Mars from the Planets of Holst, and we worked on it. We had four rehearsals, I believe, and we worked on that, and we played it at the state contest. Now, any of you who don't know that piece know the euphonium part is wonderful. Ones you can play in 5/4. A lot of the parts aren't real hard, but there's a couple parts the woodwinds have to play of the violins that are unplayable. And so during that spot, we didn't have enough time to work out the notes. So it was about a measure and a half. And so I added a cymbal roll to cover up notes the woodwinds couldn't play. And Larry Gookin was one of the judges at state that year, and he just started laughing. He says, Chuck, he said, I can't believe you did that. But he says, it worked.
It worked.
We won state, by the way, that year too.
And now Toby is principal trombonist in the Boston
Symphony. Yes.
Right.
Principal in Boston. And a sidelight for people who don't know, he married one of my flute players who was a drum major.
There's a lot of that around too.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about with some future interviews with some band directors. With the thing about the state, what can you tell us about and I'll be going into more detail, I think in 2 weeks when Dave Becker will be in our conversations, and who is really the guiding light to getting the state band contest here. But what are some of your first impressions of the first year or first couple of years of the state contest?
Well, man, that's ancient history, Dave. And I'm old.
I'm talking with you, and I'm talking too, so that feeds right into this question.
Well, and I realize that there's a certain amount of controversy about competition in music. I understand that, but I also understand human nature. And when you have a contest of that magnitude, there's a real drive to do well. And so, yes, we believe that music should be performed for music's sake. And I truly believe that. It's wonderful music. Your professional orchestras don't play in a competition other than they're playing to play well so they don't lose their job. But going to a state contest really motivates the kids to work on their music. And I believe that anything that I could do to get kids to practice and to really work on their instrument and improve themselves was beneficial. And the competitions did that. And the state competition was just a higher level of competition, more motivation.
But with the state competitions and with all the concerts that you've done, if you had to pick one piece of music of a band that could play anything, okay, that you've played in the past, what would be one more piece of music that you would like, or one piece in the past that you would like to conduct again?
Oh man, so many things jump in my mind.
The
Enigma
first thing
variation.
that comes to your brain, first song.
But
What's the first song that comes to your mind?
the first one that jumped to my head was Enigma Variations, the transcription. So beautiful. And I got to give you the second one too. The Mark Hinesley transcription we did of pictures at an exhibition. We did the entire pictures for contest. We played 2 or 3 movements. Next festival, we would do 2 or 3 different movements or rotate one in and out all the way through. We did the entire pictures.
Yeah, and with the Enigma Variations, I haven't heard that be played from a band for quite a while. It's a great piece of music, hard, but such a beautiful, beautiful piece, and the kids loved it. And I remember when your band played the Hinesley transcription. In fact, you had me come in and work with your low brass, I think, for one of those years.
Good for me. I did something right.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, something else that's kind of fun is this about you personally is you've got quite a collection of tubas and instruments. Do you even know how many instruments you have at home?
Well, I have a lot less now. I think I inherited that from Dr. Richards because things that go in circles. Uh, a lot of you also know me. I have a really nice MGA, and the MGA I bought in 1980. Okay, I'm going to go back on that story.
Okay.
Uh, Mike Walmart, who a lot of you people know, Mike
Well,
Walmart bought.
just a
Go
minute.
ahead.
Tell people who Mike Walmart is
Okay,
because a lot of
Mike
people don't know.
Walmart worked for the OSAA. He was the one that was in charge of the first state band contest and did that until I don't know when, 2005,
Yeah,
2008. For
about that.
about yeah, for at least 15 to 20 years, he was in charge of the state band, choir, orchestra, and solo contest. He did all of them. And he took, by the way, his daughter took tuba lessons from me, Megan, and then Mike later took tuba lessons from me. In the process, I sold my tuba that I was using in the symphony, except I'd gotten a better horn. And I took that money and bought an MGA and had that for years. Yeah, my MGA, the tuba paid all of the MGA. And I had that for years, and it was not in good shape. I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but sat in the garage for about 20 years. In 2011, I decided I had to restore it. Well, that cost a lot of money. So I sold off about 2/3 of my tubas and stuff and my horns that I had collected. But I still have 4 or 5 really good horns, tubas, and some others that are historical.
What's the oldest instrument that you have?
I don't know the oldest. I have a fine backfire tuba from 1865, and I have a contrabass ocarina that I bought in Paris that was made in the early 1800s. That's probably the oldest.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those. They're pretty fun to look at, and I'm sure fun to play. Well, I was trying to think, and I could not think of a retired band director who's really retired. And I know that both you and I are doing a lot of things. So now, what are you doing with your free time? I shouldn't say free time. What are you doing these days to keep busy?
Well, here's a good one. Band directors are pretty busy people, and you keep really busy and active in it. And there are a lot of things that you don't get done when you're directing. So I'm still trying to catch up on getting some things organized. I also collect old music photos, Oregon photos from the 19th century and early 20th century, trying to categorize them, trying to get things done that I didn't get done the last 50 years.
Yeah. Was it, what did you say, 54 years of teaching? Is that right?
Yeah, something like
Something
that.
like that.
You can go back further than that, I suppose, because when I was in college, I had a music studio downtown. I had 30 private students when I was at Portland State.
So if you could go back and talk to your 25-year-old self, what would be one piece of advice you'd give to him at this time?
Oh, wow. Um, as far as being a band director, I mean, you could talk about private life as well as other things. By the way, you're hearing the garbage trucks outside, maybe. Uh, to do kind of what I did, but didn't realize at the time how important it was going to music conferences, going to sessions, talking to other people about literature, things that they do, um, being a sponge,
Yeah.
basically. And in my younger years, I learned a lot in my first 5, 6 years when I was getting my master's program, going to lunch with the old directors,
Yeah.
guys in their mid 30s, and just listening to them talk. I didn't say a word. I
Yeah.
just listened. I realize you would find that hard to believe now, but
Well, no, I agree. When I first started teaching, I tried to do what you just said. I went to all the music conferences, I listened and I learned, and I asked questions, lots of questions. And even when I was working at Lake Oswego, there'd be times where I would give you a call and ask your advice. So I think it's really important for all band directors not to have the ego of or being afraid of asking questions of anybody.
oh, that's for sure. I mean, it's uh, that's one of the things. Thank you for asking. So bringing that up. What would I tell some the 25-year-old Chuck? Uh, I tell them bring in other directors to work with your band. Never be embarrassed or ashamed of what you have. If you're working hard and the kids are working hard, if that's where you are, that's where you are because other people know more than you. And even if they don't know more than you, they know other ways to do things. And it breaks it up for the kids, and you learn a lot. I feel bad that more people don't take advantage of retired people like you and myself, Ben Brooks, Dave Becker. There's a lot of them out there,
Right.
and utilize them more to help their groups.
I had a couple more questions, but I'm opening this up to the people watching on Facebook. There are some people watching. If you have any questions, go ahead and write them in the comments section, and I can ask Chuck those questions. Now, Chuck, with the things going on this year with the coronavirus and just a lot of things that are just up in the air, uh, I know there's a lot of music teachers that are worried about not only right now, but the beginning of next year and what's going to happen. Any thoughts about what would you tell those directors?
Well, yeah, I have some thoughts. I'm sure that they probably already are doing them as best they can. And that is that remembering that music may be a vocation for us, that we've studied music and love music. But for a lot of kids, the reason they're in music is from the social aspect, being a part of a group, being successful, having friends, being in a safe space, going places, doing things. And so if I were directing today, I'd be doing what a lot of people are doing on Zoom, but I wouldn't be worrying so much about music. I'd be trying to keep the kids together as friends, doing activities, and as soon as it's so, if in August things are better and lift up, I'd make sure I had a band get together and getting the kids together and trying to get some of that back because I have a fear that I'm sure many directors out there have that your good kids are going to come back and
Yeah,
some of the others will, but some of the marginal kids that one tuba player you might have is not a very good player may drop. And
yeah.
so I really feel for the directors today trying to keep it going for the fall.
One director that I think is doing a great job is Brandon Hanson from Roseburg. And I don't know if you've seen his YouTube videos on, it's a weekly broadcast that he does to his band members. And it's called, see if I remember this correctly, Corona Vacation Videos. And they are a hoot. And it's that connection that he's getting with the band kids are keeping that connection, and that's what's going to really save the music programs. I think keeping the
Yeah.
kids involved.
You know, I actually posted one of those on the Oregon Band Directors page. There's one on the page,
Yeah,
uh, and then in another some other guys having. I know Paul Nicholas did this. They did movie night where they do the comments on the side and get a bunch of their band kids to come together. And I'm sure a lot of directors are doing different things, but
right.
anything to make it human. Yeah.
Okay, we have got a couple questions here for you. This is from Stephen. What would be your top 5 things to focus on building a band program?
Um, Schmoozing with the head counselor because the counselors control a lot of your program. If your counselors aren't behind you, you're in big trouble.
Yeah,
Uh, Working with this vice principal or whoever does the master schedule. Many times, no matter how good you are as a director, if the schedule schedules kids out of your class,
Yeah.
you're hurt bad. By the way, at Sam Barlow, I was the one that did the master schedule. There was two of us, and I was 50% of the team,
Yeah.
which didn't hurt any.
The thing about the master schedule is I would always go and talk with our vice principal in charge of this master schedule in the spring, but also I'd go back in the summer because changes happen. And a lot of times they don't know the ramifications of having that one class opposite another class. So they do really need to be aware. Also with counselors, anytime a counselor added a kid to band, I brought them candy. And if they added a tuba player or a French horn player, I got them Starbucks.
Wow. I remember I always brought chocolates and flowers.
Yeah.
The secretary, we always, the old standard answer is the two people you have to be best friends with is the head secretary and head custodian.
Yeah.
Well, the head custodian, I agree with. But the people that can make or break you is a person who does the schedule and the philosophy of the counseling department.
Yes.
Is band important? Is it really good? Let me give you another one I think is really important too. At least I do believe in it, and that is private lessons. I really encourage kids to take private lessons. I called the parents. I always gave handouts during student teacher conferences. That was really important. I made many a phone call to parents about taking lessons. But as part of that, something I really believed in, and I wrote an article about it once, and couldn't believe it, but the National MENC put it in a book and had me expand on, is how do you promote the individual in a group situation? That was kind of what the gist of it was. And at Sam Barlow, we had a wall of fame, and other people have things like that.
Right.
And morning announcements mentioning the kids that made All-State or who are going to go on to state solo contest. Or and if you don't have a principal who comes down to the band room, having him come down or her come down and thanking the kids for being at the football game last night or basketball game, doing things to bring the band into light of the student body where the band has respect. If
Exactly.
the band has respect, the kids will want a part of it. And sometimes you'll get a coach. John Harrington was the football coach at Barlow, ended up being the principal of David Douglas, and was he the superintendent of David Douglas later? His son, Joey Harrington. Anyway, John, because we played at football games, he required the football team to come to our fall program dressed up in a shirt and tie and be at our fall concert. His comment was, if you perform for them and support them, they can support you.
Yeah, I think getting the more people to come in during rehearsals or performances is huge. I have a couple more questions. I don't want to get too far behind. Here's one from Ken. What can we do for big schools based on OSAA with small bands to feel successful at festival time when competition really isn't possible?
Okay, I had to digest kind of where that was coming from a little bit. Excellent question. I'm not really sure what you can do other than to find other venues of performance that you can the kids feel good about, like a band trip or an exchange with their high school. Because if I'm reading this correctly, it's a large school with a program, for lack of a better term, that wouldn't be competitive in a competition situation, and yet has some good kids in it. Pick good literature,
Yeah,
and find ways to make the kids feel good about it.
that's it. I totally agree. Is picking the right music is so important. And as a band director, that was the hardest thing that I had to do, was make sure that the music was correct. And then with small schools, if I may interject, Chuck, is to, because you do this anyway, is you rewrite the music.
Yeah.
All right. I got a couple more questions here.
Let me add one more thing to that on
Yeah.
music. If especially if you're not going to be in a competitive situation, I really believe in programmatic music. The kids get into music when it has a story and a reason why it was written. Your audience, your parents, the other listeners can really relate a lot more to the music than just a great piece of music, but there's not the backstory to it. Uh, the I'm trying to think of some pieces. The symphony that Dan Buchwitz wrote, Symphony in C, of the bombing of
Yeah.
Dresden,
Yeah.
Germany, was a real emotional experience for the kids. And other pieces like that that tell a story, I would keep trying to find.
Exactly. Getting the kids involved in the music and not just playing the notes. All right. Michael Birch Paces is here.
Oh, I don't.
Too late.
Careful.
It's already here. Michael writes, what's the best way to encourage students to stay in band once they graduate from high school?
I think that's a simple one. Don't overtax them as high school kids. Make sure they enjoy and having fun in music. Excuse me, I always hate that word fun. Make sure they're enjoying playing music and get satisfaction from it. Uh, that was one of the things, if you talk to my alumni, you'll know, they'll tell you this. My biggest sense of pride I got, the biggest compliment I got was I had probably an average of 30, 35 seniors every year in my band. And out of that, maybe 32 would go to college. And out of that, 25 to 30 would play in their college bands. And I says, that's the biggest compliment you can give me is to continue playing your instrument.
Right.
And they did. Now, a lot of them, to be honest, would drop out after their sophomore year or maybe into because their major got too busy, but they went into college. I also told them it's a good way to make friends real fast because they have something in common right away with the kids in music. And by the way, let me do a follow up on that. The second biggest compliment you can get, and maybe it's even bigger, is when you've been taught for a while, is when your band kids get married and have kids and they encourage and push their kids into music because they had such a good experience.
Yes, I totally agree. And there is a Facebook page called I Played in Chuck Bolton's Band.
But not started by me.
Not started by you. No, no, this is from your
Stu.
minions. All right, let's thank you, Michael, for that question. I have two more questions right here. Let's see. This is from Aaron, and he would love to see old band pictures from Oregon. Are you scanning and posting them online?
Am I what?
Are you scanning and posting old band pictures from Oregon? Because I've seen a couple on the OBDA page, like the Cherry Band and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of those old pictures?
Uh, I hate to say this, but I probably have 300 to 400 different Oregon photos from that are 100 years or more older. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I just had a thought yesterday. You realize what week this is?
Yes, I do.
State band contest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you were thinking, but that's what I was thinking. Okay, I'm going to repost uh, on Wednesday some of the videos that I've taken in past years of the 2A day, of the see that'd be the 3A, 4A day,
Right.
and the full orchestra day, and then the 2A, 5A day on Friday. And I'll do it on Friday, and then on Saturday, some of those the 6A bands. Probably the place winners from each year. I'm going to see if I can get that done. In the process, I'm going to put some different pictures up of bands from different cities. Um, Astoria has a long tradition. Seaside has a long tradition. Tillamook, um, uh, Ashland, Roseburg, as we've already talked, had terrific bands. You can go around the state. There's a long tradition in a lot of these towns.
Yeah, that's great, and I kind of like that. I like that picture of the Bud's Cherry Band. Maybe it's something I can ask you to do, maybe once a month or so. throw in some of their old picture that you
I
have of
actually,
them.
I actually put that up. People won't remember this. I put that up the day Mary Lou Boderman retired because it's a Salem kids
This
band.
okay. Oh yeah, I got one more question. We're getting close to our time. We didn't know how long this was going to last. Chuck was saying maybe 20 or 30 minutes. I knew that we could stretch it out a little bit because, Chuck, you have such great information, and I love listening to you talk. This comes from Stephen. There you are. When programming music, how did you program fall versus spring, and what was your goal to achieve by this programming?
You're back to my philosophies again. Okay, my fall program, jazz band and symphonic band, concert band, freshman band, I always featured my weakest sections.
Right.
I gave them, my trombones and jazz band were weak. We did a trombone section feature in the fall because I wanted to make those kids practice. It's just like talking about competition, if that's a motivation, and performance is a motivation. So I did that a lot. And then in the spring, I always featured my strongest soloists and my strongest sections and hid the weakest ones. And that again is music selection, which the longer you teach, and like Dave was mentioning earlier, uh, music selection can make a huge difference in success or failure in a performance. And I don't not even talking about competition. I'm just talking about plain performance.
Yes, totally agree. All right. So, and then for your spring, what about your spring program?
Well, then I'd feature the strongest groups and the strongest soloists, and we talked about building programs. I always featured my seniors who placed at state, playing part of their solos. Um, I did all I could to promote the good kid. I don't like the word good kids. To promote your outstanding players, the kids that were more serious about music. Um, at the same time, doing music that we all enjoyed, but always did new music. And I did my one pop sort of tune with the symphonic band, the top band at Barlow Symphonic. I realized today most people call their second or third band symphonic band, but I would do the a medley from the most recent Disney movie or a musical or something. But I only did one of those a year, and that was the spring program, and that usually was a week after the state contest, so we only had 3 or 4 days to rehearse it.
I was just remembering, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I still think you're doing this. Is for your winter concert, you would have an alumni band perform.
Yes, and Paul Nicholas has continued that. We have a lot of alumni, yes,
They come back and
and we'd have a lot come back, a lot of kids come back.
so they play with your symphonic band, for example, so they're just making one big band,
Yeah, yeah.
and
No, that was really fun.
yeah, and did you conduct that this last year?
Well, what we did when Paul came is I conduct the first half of the song, and then he conducts the second half because he has more alumni now that'll show up than I do. So we always do a baton relay in the middle of the song.
uh, well, Chuck, our time's just about up, and I wanted to thank you so much for helping me through the stress this morning and last night, and trying to get this streaming going. And I think it's really going to be fun to get a chance to talk to some of the great band directors in the state. One of the things we'll be doing, we'll try to do it every week, just during this virus time, just because people are looking for something to do. So I've got the next 2 weeks planned out. Next week for sure, and I'm going to put you away here for a second, Check. Next week is going to be with Ben Brooks. Ben was the band and orchestra teacher at Reynolds High School, close friend of mine, and again, a wealth of information and just a great person altogether. So that will be next week. I think it's going to be, I want to say a week from Wednesday. I'll confirm with Ben, and I'll go ahead and put that on the Facebook page. We will also be able to put this video on YouTube, so I'll broadcast that out probably later on this afternoon, and we'll see where this all goes. So thank you again, Chuck. Thank you for everybody on Facebook Live, and if you haven't, you're just watching this after the fact, thank you for tuning in. It's great to hear wonderful teachers like Chuck Bolton. Thank you, Chuck, and everybody, thank you again. Have a great rest of the year.